Reading FC were unable to hold on to a 2-goal lead at home to QPR for the second season in a row as a fine 2-0 lead created by a Jeff Hendrick double fell to a disappointing 2-2 draw. Welcome to episode 323 of the Tilehurst podcast, the podcast by Reading fans for Reading fans. I'm your host, Marc Mayo. Joining me this week to talk about some Ranger danger is Harry Chafer. How's it going, mate?
Yeah, hi Mark. Yeah, not too bad. It's good to be back on the pod, and we'll talk about what happened yesterday.
Yeah, we've got a lot to unpack, I think it's fair to say. Later on as well, we'll be doing the mailbag, hearing your questions, and looking ahead to the Stoke game next week. I've also got a pub chat, the return of pub chat this week, where we look at a little bit of something different around Reading Football Club. Paula Martin from Star is joining me to talk about Star and the Reading FC women's team, who are back underway today as well. So, yeah, let's get into some recap then. The 2-2 draw for the QPR game. Thank you to our sponsors, ZCZ Films, and our Patreon subscribers as we get into that. So let's talk about that game yesterday afternoon.
Come rain or shine, it's time to relive the latest match action with the recap.
This podcast is sponsored by ZCZ Films, Reading's oldest ultras.
Well, it was a bit of a Jeff Hendrick spectacular to start with, Harry. That was the storyline, wasn't it? I mean, an absolute cracker from a good 30-yard distance, a real daisy cutter of a goal, put Reading ahead. And then I think the second one was from about half a yard out, which was also just as valuable. So Reading looking pretty good. And I mean, to talk about Jeff Hendrick at the start, we've not really signed him for his goals, has he? And Paul Ince saying after the game that he's probably had a bit of unfair criticism. I mean, do you agree with that? Do you think that we've actually been a bit harsh on Jeff Hendrick? Because he's not really kind of been a fan favourite since joining on loan, has he?
No, he's failed to live up to those expectations that I think we all had. I think we were all pretty impressed with the signing when he came in. Partly due to our situation, we didn't think we'd be able to get in a player of that kind of stature. But yeah, maybe he has become a bit of a scapegoat. I mean, I think football fans have a tendency to pick out a single player if they're not performing that well and the team's not performing that well. But yeah, I think he's just failed to live up to expectations. But I mean, that first goal in particular yesterday was pretty impressive. I mean, I didn't quite realise how far out it was until I watched the replays after the game, because I sit in Club 1871. But yeah, it was some strike, and I mean, that's the only sort of place he could have put it to score, I think, just kissing the post as it went in. And then, yeah, that second goal was, I think, the complete opposite. I mean, it would have summed up Chef's luck and season if he'd have been called offside for that, I think. And then it would have been disallowed. But yeah, two really important goals and puts us in a really good position. And as we were saying just before we came on air, you know, not dropping a point after being in front at home all season, you'd have thought that would have got us been enough for all 3 points. Sorry, but yeah, it wasn't to be.
Yeah, I think that it is an interesting stat that I didn't realise until after the game, is that this is the first time we've dropped points from a winning position at home all season, and that's in all competitions. We've got back to draws and lost, but yeah, it's an interesting one. I suppose the key moment that Paul Ince picked out as well was that this potential 3-0 penalty on Shane Long. Is there much in it? I think it's usually quite telling that the club didn't even include it in their highlights package, which you contrast that to the Burnley one when Tom Ince got fouled and didn't get given a penalty. The club went really big on that. So I think maybe, I don't know, do you think it was a penalty?
I mean, I don't think it was Tom Ince at Burnley levels of penalty like Stone. It wasn't Stonewall, was it? I have to say, from my view, again, I didn't have the best view, and to me it looked like a bit of a 50-50 shoulder barge that, you know, I would have been very surprised if it had been given. But, you know, Ince was adamant, wasn't he, in his post-match interviews. So but, you know, Paul Ince has a bit of history for saying dubious things in his interviews, so maybe you take that with a pinch of salt. But yeah, I haven't seen any other fans really back that up either and say it was as Stonewall as Ince is saying. So yeah, I think we can sort of forget about that one in all honesty.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I think that Long's probably looking for it at the end of the day, and the referee has a decision to make, but he's pretty happy not to make it or not to give it at least. So and then it gets into the second half, and it's just such a bit of a switch. And I suppose you can play this one so many ways, can't you? You can play it as a typical championship game where two teams that aren't brilliant, and it kind of, the pendulum swings and all that sort of stuff. I suppose from a Reading perspective, we only had 3 shots in the second half, and that was all in kind of one flurry as well. So did we just give, like, I don't, give up isn't really the word, is it? But did we just kind of back off too much and sit on the lead a bit too much and actually just forget how to play?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a mixture of things. I mean, QPR were always going to be a little bit better than they were in the first half, in the second half. So we always had to expect some kind of reaction. But I think Ince was right in what he said after the game, that, we have a tendency to go ahead and just protect it. And, maybe that's just a byproduct of not winning many games in the past couple of years, that, it's our natural instinct to drop back and sort of invite pressure where, we could have caused a bit more damage on the counter attack. And, we'd showed in the first half that, even away from Jeff Hendrick's 2 goals, we were causing them problems. And, Shane Long had a good chance in the first half, I remember. So, yeah, I think it's a mixture of QPR being a little bit better and putting us under a bit more pressure and getting the likes of Chair and Field on the ball a bit more. And also us just having, I think it's a natural instinct of just sitting deep. But whether that stems from the manager, because, we know he's quite a pragmatic coach and, a bit of he knows the situation we're in where we just need to pick up points, or whether it's something that's just a bit natural within the players to sit back, I don't know. But, we're quite lucky that it hasn't come back to bite us on more occasions than it has. So that's something that needs to be looked at, I think.
Yeah, I think that is the fact that it is the first time this has happened this season is a little bit of it's been coming, I suppose, is the way that I would put it. It's not actually it's a bit of a surprise that it was the first time. And I mean, you look at the goals. I mean, the first goal, Tom Holmes gets kind of caught high up the pitch, and Naby Sarr doesn't move over to take the free man. You end up kind of with two markers on one player, and then and Roberts is free. Second goal, I mean, it's a bit of a weird one, isn't it? And Tom Holmes, again, tracks his man out of the box. Then he doesn't actually drop back in when his marker's neutralised. And it's a good ball in, but Baba Rahman doesn't attack the ball, and it's a bit of a clumsy kind of touch. And actually, it's a really good Joe Lumley save that palms it over to Roberts to finish off. And I think it's a bit of an overload, isn't it? But I don't know if you've noticed on the timing on the highlights, but it's a class Lumley save and almost bails us out there.
Yeah, it's it was a really good save, but I think there's three men at the back post, wasn't there, for the second goal, completely free.
Yeah,
it's just frustrating. I mean, Lumley had made a really good save. I think it was at 2-1, not long before that. So I think it was coming, and you could see that second goal coming up, pretty much an exact replica of the QPR home game last season, where as soon as it got to 3-2, then I think it was coming, which is annoying, because we've sort of built a confidence in our game management. I certainly have as a fan watching. I'm not as nervous when it's 10 minutes to go and we're winning than I have been in previous years. But yeah, it's frustrating couple of goals to concede. I mean, I thought the first one and first instance was a good goal from Roberts. I think he did well. So I think he got past Scott Dan and then rolled it past Lumley. Then the second one just spoke about is frustrating, but we live and we learn, I guess.
Yeah, that's the question for Reading now, is how we kind of bounce back from it. We'll talk a little bit more about this in Mailbag, because there's some good questions on kind of Paul Ince's role in this. But we'll hear from Paul Ince now, hear what he had to say about the game, and then we'll go into Mailbag and hear from you guys.
I'm disappointed with the referee, because we had a blatant penalty on Shane Long. That puts the game to bed. That's 3-0. They're not coming back for that. He made a poor decision. That annoys me up, because I've done it. We had it at Burnley. But taking penalty decision, that blatant penalty away, not happy with the second half performance. We come out too passive, and I don't know what it is with this club sometimes, or maybe it's before I got here, every time we get a lead, they want to protect it, and they go deeper and deeper and deeper, and you can't. You got to keep playing the same way. First half, I thought we had numerous chances and deserved a 2-goal lead. To be fair, I mean they had 1 or 2 skirmishes, but overall, coming in at 2-0, you know, you're quite content. We haven't played well, to be fair. Didn't kick the ball well in the first half, and you're walking 2-0 up. So, as a manager, yes, I'm quite pleased with that. Second half, I'm just saying, clean sheet. Keep, not so much doing what you're doing, but improving different little elements of the game. We need to keep the ball better, we need to get on the ball, we need to get our high up the park. We did none of those.
For all the latest Reading news, analysis and opinion, visit the website at thetilehurstend.com.
You can always get in touch with the show on the Gmail, thetilehurstend@gmail.com, also the Facebook and the Twitter. Always put out a call up for questions in advance of the recording. DW's got in touch today saying, what do you think was going through Paul Ince's head when making those substitutions? I mean, it was an interesting one, I think it's fair to say. Unfortunately, we lost Sam Hutchinson in the 15th minute, so that was one sub gone. Shane Long coming on, and I mean, I think he said 3 to 4 weeks with a bit of an Achilles issue for Hutchinson, so that's a classic Sam Hutchinson, unfortunately, back and pretty quickly gone. So that's how it happened. But then the 61st minute, Tom McIntyre on for Mamadou Loum in midfield, and then Junior Hoylett coming off for Scott Dan, which meant that Andy Yeardon went back into kind of right back, and then Dan in the middle with Sarr and Holmes. And I guess you could say that is a very negative change, obviously taking a player like Hoylett off. You look at the other options that he had on the bench, maybe Mbenge would have been a bit better, someone a bit more kind of agility to manage the game and neutralise the QPR threat in that sense. We did have later on, after the first goal, Yaku Meite and Lucas Shaw came on for Shane Long and Andy Carroll. So, I mean, that's just a bit of a change up front. I'm not really sure Lucas Shaw is someone that you're going to play on the counter-attack much with, but I can understand putting Meite on for Carroll. So, I don't know, what do you make of those substitutions? Was it kind of overly negative, or was this maybe this result was going to come anyway?
Yeah, well, I actually thought the starting lineup was a bit too negative. I know Ince's been deployed in that forward role quite a bit, but I think at home we can afford to drop him back into midfield and go with 2 genuine strikers. And I don't think it's a coincidence that our fortunes sort of changed a bit when Hutchinson went off, unfortunately, and Long came on. So we did have those 2 strikers on the pitch, and we were a bit more fluid and attacking minded. And then those substitutions. I mean, I feel for McIntyre a little bit, because I think if you asked him and twisted his arm, I don't think he really wants to be playing in all of these different positions. I mean, he's played left wing back, left centre back, and in midfield 3 in the space of a couple of weeks, really. So I'm not convinced with him in that role either. I'd much rather see him in that left centre back role, and then to bring Scott Dan on. I think he really does look like a 35-year-old who hasn't played much football, doesn't he? He just looks a bit off the pace at the minute, and obviously he's trying to build that match fitness back up. And then for those 2 subs to be made on 60 minutes as well was quite early, and even for Ince, I think that's pretty negative pretty early on. So. Yeah, I mean, it's nothing we haven't really seen before from Ince. We've criticised his substitutions in the past, and he has a tendency to be a bit overly negative. But I think the fact that we've actually gone on to lose 3 points this time around has sort of shone a bit of a brighter light on it.
Yeah, there's been actually a lot of games when Ince hasn't made subs, particularly when we're losing. He tends to make subs quite late in those scenarios, and I think it is. I think Mbenge would have been the better shout coming on. I think, given that we'd already put McIntyre on for Loum, I think we probably had covered off enough of a defensive mindset. And then, I've already said that I don't think putting Zhao on when you're ahead is going to do much. He's not going to really, counter attack and carry the ball upfield much, is he? So, JP, with the other question then this week, what have I done to deserve all these years of Reading torment? Which is to kind of twist that question a little bit. I thought that this game is probably we're talking about playoffs and all this sort of stuff. It's kind of a little bit tongue-in-cheek when we talk about playoffs, but Reading would have only been 2 points off the playoffs had we won this game. We obviously would have been talking about that, and we'd be, I think, 10th and looking forward and all this sort of stuff. But I think it's these sort of games are the games that are going to mean that fairy tale finish just isn't. It probably isn't going to happen in reality, is it? And if we've still got a lot of the season to go. We could end up in a relegation battle, obviously, but I think this is the sort of game where you need to close that out, and particularly with our away form not being particularly special, I think that's the sort of one that it means that we are probably looking at a championship season again next year, aren't we?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, that playoff talk for me anyway is most definitely tongue in cheek. Our priority is to stay up this season. I mean, for us to even be comfortable that we're going to be in the championship next season is good enough for me. I mean, going back to the original question, I think it's part and parcel of being a Reading fan. Years of torment, and unless you support one of the big boys, you're going to have your fair share of ups and downs. And this league is so tight this season, even for the championship standards. We always say how tight it is, and anyone can beat anybody. But just for there being only like 4 or 5 points between the playoffs and I think it's like 16th or 15th is ridiculous. So even though it is it's disappointing to drop 2 points and draw the game, you still never know. We could be in a relegation battle come May, or we could be trying to sneak into the top 6. I think we've shown that we can mix it with the best in this league this season, but we've also shown that we can we're gonna have pretty shocking days and get pumped by 3 or 4. So yeah, you just never know. But I'm not getting carried away with any playoff talk myself.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I mean, looking at the table at the moment, it's interesting that 3 of the teams in the playoffs, Watford, Middlesbrough and West Brom, have all had pretty poor results at times this year. Certainly Middlesbrough and West Brom started badly, and they've changed their manager, and now they're flying. And Norwich changed their manager and won 4-0 at Preston yesterday, which, I mean, that'll just be so boring, wouldn't it, if it's Watford, West Brom and Norwich in the playoffs and Burnley and Sheffield United going up. But anything can happen. Sunderland, even Swansea, who were terrible when we played them, are doing all right, and we're not a million miles away. So I think that 11-point gap to the relegation zone is the key thing at the moment. And Stoke, which we'll get onto in a little bit, will be a good litmus test to see if we are going to drop into that kind of rabble of teams that are actually a few points below Reading at the moment. But it won't take much for them to catch us. Let's go into some pub chat now then. Welcome Paula Martin to the show and talk about the Reading FC women's team and a little bit of Start as well.
You're listening to the Tilehurst End podcast by Reading fans for Reading fans.
Welcome back to the show and welcome to Pubchat, the part of the show where we like to kind of shine a light on parts of the Reading FC club and community that we don't always get to do full justice to. And to do that with me this week and talk the women's team and a little bit of Star as well is Paula Martin. How's it going, Paula?
Yeah, fine. Looking forward to the women's game coming back after the winter break. It's I've missed it.
Yes, we have. I mean, it's after the podcast is recorded today, but we'll probably, by the time you're listening to this, you'll know the score that Reading are playing Everton away to restart the Women's Super League season in a bit of an interesting spot. And actually, the return of Reading season, which we'll get onto in a second, has kind of been overshadowed in a way by what's been a kind of, I suppose, kind of controversial topic has come up, but also maybe that's controversial in the way that it's come up, but actually is a very prescient and very important topic has come up in this. Emma Mukandi, who is the captain of the women's team, coming out and saying that when she fell pregnant about 18 months ago or so, was it? Or probably a bit longer than that.
A bit longer than that now, yes.
Yeah, didn't feel like she was necessarily supported by the club. And we've had the manager come out and say that, we did kind of more than we perhaps needed to, but at the same point, she's accepted that Reading need to kind of keep learning and keep building. So Kelly Chambers coming out and saying that was good, but then I suppose it leaves us kind of wondering exactly kind of what happened and what's your kind of sense of it all, Paula?
Well, I find it interesting that Emma's actually tweeted and basically said, I wasn't criticising the club, I was trying to help it move forward so that whoever does this next time, they do it better, which is a very different thing to the way it came out initially. It came out as a criticism, and I've been hard done by, rather than it could have been done better, and I want to help the club to do it better. Which is, I would hope, what everybody would be the approach they take.
Yeah, there was a couple of other comments that she came out with, particularly as being captain, saying that the standards of the team were perhaps quite not what she's seen before. I mean, she's played for Arsenal before and the Scottish national team, which I guess are probably higher, or definitely are higher levels than what Reading are used to. And as a club in the WSL, is very much one of the probably less well-funded clubs. Certainly not got the tradition as like Chelsea and Arsenal, at least.
Well, it's not just the tradition. It doesn't have the Premier League money behind it. It's the only one in the WSL that doesn't have Premier League money behind it. And we all know what the position with money is at the moment in the club. It's all very definitely under the microscope. So I'm not really surprised in that respect. And we are still punching above our weight, and long may that last.
Yeah, for sure. I suppose on this kind of topic is that I suppose the thing to kind of take from it is that it kind of shows that the women's game as a professional entity is still very young, isn't it? And still that these sorts of things are going to be coming up, and they aren't going to get it right all the time. And that it's so long as they are actually learning and improving. And it is, it's not just Reading, obviously, that has to deal with this. There's kind of the white shorts campaign at the moment that I think it's the England team has said they're not going to play in white shorts after the World Cup in the summer because of period issues and stuff like that. There's also, even in tennis this week, there's Naomi Osaka's announced that she's pregnant and is taking a year out of the game. These things are very specific issues to women's football and women's sport, and that so long as there is progress being made, then I think it's something that, I mean, it's obviously difficult for the sports people that are in it at the moment and the sports women in it. But I guess from a fan's perspective, that's kind of all we can ask, I guess.
It is. And for many years, women have just played sport and until they've had a family, and then very often just given up the sport. In lots of ways, the fact that Emma's back and playing and is back as captain is brilliant. It shows that women's sport is now becoming more of a career rather than the start of a career, and then it gets completely hijacked by having a family.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's talk about the return of the season then. Everton later on. Reading find themselves 10th in the league. Didn't actually finish the first half of the season badly at all. There was the narrow defeat at Chelsea, winning at home to Tottenham, and a draw with Liverpool. And I suppose what's the state of the team at the moment then? What's the kind of hopes for the second half of the season?
Well, just like the men's team, there's been problems occasionally with injuries, which disrupts it. I don't think Kelly's been able to play a consistent team all the time. And a little bit like last season. Last season we started badly and then got better. So, maybe that's working. It takes a little bit of time for the new guys to get integrated into the team. But I'm quite hopeful. As you can tell, I haven't gone to watch them at Everton, and that's something I would like to raise, because I've tried to sort out some away travel for the women's team, because there isn't the tradition of following clubs away quite the same way as in the men's game. So we did run a coach to Aston Villa, but I will admit that it wasn't anywhere near full and it made a loss. So I'm not particularly popular with the rest of the staff, but I would like to be able to get that shifting. And so if anybody that's listening to the podcast is interested to going to watch the women away, I know Pete, who does your reports, is very interested and is eager to help me get it sorted. If you could contact Star and let us know that you want to go, and we'll see if we can get a coach either towards the end of the season or maybe start next season with some more regular coaches to go and watch the women away.
Yeah, certainly it is, because it's a culture thing, is a bit of a tradition thing as well in terms of going away, because actually in the men's game in other countries, think of Spain and Italy, certain top flight teams will only take 100 fans away, even though it's, I guess it's maybe a bigger country and stuff. But yeah, it's something that you've got to kind of get going over time, and definitely something that yeah, if anyone wants to get in touch with the podcast and if they're eager to help and everything, the usual social media channels are the best way to do that for Star as well. So Reading then, kind of the relegation battle fears at the start of the season, I guess they've been tempered because Leicester have just lost every game, basically. Like, it's kind of how it's got, really, isn't it?
Well, and to be honest, we were losing to Leicester when we played them at our place, and it was two goals right at the end of the game that meant we won it, and that, I think, actually pushed Leicester further down and actually gave us a chance to move forward. I think if we'd lost that game, we may well have been in the position that Leicester's in now. It was, yeah, and as long as they carry on doing quite so badly, we'll be safe, because there is only one team relegated. I mean, that is also part of the problem with WSL. With only 12 teams in the league, you don't get this regular weekend after weekend, home and away and so on. It gets very bitty. You get gaps. It all stops for the internationals for more than a week, and you can't get into a habit. I think that's the thing, because I don't know about you, but I think men's football is very definitely a habit that you manage to get yourself embroiled in, and then it's every Saturday, especially when you're in the Championship. I mean, if we get to the Premier League, it's going to be every Saturday or Sunday or whatever. But at the moment, it's every Saturday is going to be football, and it just doesn't work like that in the WSL.
Yeah, it's the flow, isn't it? Because, I mean, Reading we've got Everton away today, then we're at home to Man United on the 22nd next week, got Leicester away in the FA Cup on the 29th, and then away to Liverpool. And then there's a gap of about a month that I presume there would be the fifth round of the FA Cup in if we get there, but that's a bit of a thing. And it is the flow. I mean, obviously, as you say, Championship football. I mean, to another extreme, I follow baseball, and that is literally like every day that you really get stuck into and everything. So, I think I've always found that a bit of an issue with the women's game, and it comes amid issues actually for like Arsenal and Chelsea. They say they're playing too often as well in the European competitions and such. So it's an issue that's going to have to be looked at and sorted out over the long term, I think. So yeah, as I say, the next time that Reading are back at the Select Car Leasing Stadium, January 22nd for 2 p.m. kickoff against Man United. So definitely get yourselves down to that.
Please do, because we've sold so many tickets that if we're not careful, it's going to be a Man United home game. In effect, because I mean, like, because they're a very new team, but because they're Manchester United, they have suddenly got a very large following.
Yeah.
Whereas Chelsea and Arsenal, when they come, they always bring a lot and usually have a few vocal people, so that it does sound like it's a home game for them, and that's really why I'd quite like to get us to get an away following, so that we can actually return the favour to maybe the smaller clubs.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's talk about, as we just mentioned, Man United, let's talk about Star as well, which is something that you're heavily involved in, because as the Man United FA Cup draw has come and the seating allocation and all the details have been announced for that we're going for an 8 p.m. kickoff in a fortnight on a Saturday evening up to Old Trafford. £46 a ticket for an adult, 3,000 tickets if you want them. So I think we'll probably sell that out, but I mean, it's not going to be hugely easy to get to, is it?
I'm not sure. And to be fair to the club, they did actually consult us before it was announced and basically said, we think it's going to be on television, either 12:30 or 5:30, and it's going to be £46. How many do you think we'll take? And that is difficult to judge. And we tried to judge it. I mean, they've got to make the decision, because Manchester United don't sell tickets on a sale or return basis. The club has to buy all the tickets. So they're understandably reluctant to go for a larger allocation and just buy all those tickets at 46 quid and not sell them. And then when I talked again to them, and Paul said, it's actually going to be 8 o'clock, we think. It took the ground away completely, because I mean, one of the Star members said, I've been to a few games up there in the Cup. I'm not particularly interested in going, but my lad wants to go, so we'll go for him. But then you can't take a youngster up for an 8 o'clock kick-up on a Saturday night, because you're not going to get home until God knows what hour. or you've got to pay a fortune to get a hotel room. It's just not going to work. And on top of that, you've got the cost of the tickets. Because last time we went, I don't know how many people realise the club actually subsidised the tickets because Manchester United wouldn't drop the ticket price to the Premier League £30 limit for away fans. So the club actually subsidised them so that we did only pay 30 quid. And even then we only took just over 3,000 to the games. So, that's the thinking behind only a 3,000 allocation. The club really wants to sell out, but they're not sure at those prices that they will.
Well, that's the thing as well, is that I covered for work the other day the Charlton versus Man United game, and they took 9,000 up, but they hadn't been to Old Trafford for like 20 years. And we've been to Old Trafford 3 times in the last 5 years, 4 FA Cup games. So the novelty has worn off, let's face it. I mean, there's no disrespect to Man United to say that we're kind of a bit bored of going to Old Trafford for these 4-0 defeats. So I think that plays a big role in it as well. So yeah,
well,
I mean,
that's why the youngsters are important, because they're the ones that have probably missed out on those 3. Us old jaded ones that have been 3 times don't care quite so much. But the kids that haven't been there, they're the ones that are desperate to go. And I think the 8 o'clock kickoff is just so difficult for them.
Yeah, well, Star are doing the coaches. What are the details for the coaches to get to Old Trafford?
It's £35, which is actually we probably really need to fill the coaches. That's close to a break-even price to us, because that's the same price as we charged for Wigan. But in fact, the coaches are going to be a bit more expensive than they were to Wigan, which is presumably the fuel costs at the moment. As against to when we had the contract signed with Horseman's. So £35 is actually very, very close to break-even price. And we're leaving, oh gosh, I can't remember now.
I think it's about 12:30 or 1 o'clock sort of time, isn't it?
I think it's something like that, yeah. I mean, it's normally allow a 4-hour journey to the northwest and aim to get there 2 hours before kickoff. And often a 4-hour journey has to have a stop because the driver has to have a stop. So, yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, well, definitely. I think with the fact that there's no trains back and staying overnight might not be the option for everyone. I think getting the Star coach is probably the best option for a lot of people. So hopefully you will fill them.
There has been a lot of interest. As I do the memberships, I'm only too aware of how many new members we've had in the last week.
Oh, well, good stuff. Well, thanks very much for coming on then, Paula. It's been great to have an update on Star as well as the women's team. So as I say, if you're listening to the podcast, go and check out the Tilehurst website and the blog for the reports and everything on how the women's game went. And hopefully we'll be starting the second half of the season with a good result.
I certainly hope so.
Be loud and be proud and back the boys and make some noise. Come on, you Rs!
Shout out to this week's podcast sponsor, ZCZ Films, showing that age is no barrier to being a hula hoop.
So welcome back, and we're here for big match preview to talk about Stoke away 3 p.m. January 21st at the old Bet365 Stadium, a stadium that we haven't won at since October 2005, courtesy of a late Dave Kitson penalty. We've actually won our last 2 against Stoke, both at home, of course, having had 10 without a win before that. Stoke are just one of those teams, Harry, aren't they, that I think, generally speaking, you start a championship season and you think they're going to be there or thereabouts. They've got some good players, not a bad manager in Alex Neil. But then actually, it's just not clicked at all, has it? 3 defeats in a row. And, we're going there and you start to think that if we're going to start picking up points away from home, this kind of needs to be those sort of games that we're going to do it in. Yeah,
I mean, Stoke have struggled, haven't they? Ever since they've come down to the championship from the Premier League. I mean, like you say, they seem to sign pretty well every season and have good players and, make decent managerial appointments on paper anyway. But for some reason just doesn't click. I don't know if they're sort of, they were so trapped in that Pulis era, weren't they, of, how Stoke played football. Maybe it's just difficult for them to get out of that, like I said, ever since they've come down from the Premier League, they seem to struggle. But Yeah, I completely agree. If we want to start picking points up away from home, and which everyone does, then these are the kinds of games you need to try and get 3 points in. I think we can. I think we more than can. I think we can cause Stoke problems. I think we can get 3 points if we really, really want them. But yeah, it's a horrible ground to go to, really, isn't it? With the last few, I mean, barring last season where it was the first game of the season, I think we've gone in the middle of winter every single year since they've been down in the Championship, and it's been 0-0s and rainy and pretty drab affair. So I'm hoping for something a little bit different on Saturday.
Yeah, it's one of those stadiums where the wind swirls around like no other, isn't it? And it really does. It's a little bit of a cliche, I know, but there's a reason why there's the cliche, isn't it? No smoke without fire. So, well, the only other thing I'd say about Stoke really is that Josh Laurent is back in the team now. He started for their 3-1 defeat at Sheffield United yesterday. Lewis Baker there as well. Tarek Fosu, another former Reading player. So, yeah, they've got players that can hurt you. And I think it'll be the purest of irony, isn't it? That Josh Laurent, I mean, his move to Stoke has not gone well. It's good to see that he's back fit and everything. I don't want it to go badly for him because he's good Reading player, and I think he conducted himself very well at the club. But it would be the moment for him to get his first Stoke goal is against Reading, isn't it? That's just totally written in the stars for me.
Yeah. I mean, it always seems to happen, doesn't it? Yeah, I have no qualms with how Laurent left. Like, I know some fans do. If I was Laurent, I probably would have left in the summer. We were a bit of a shambles of a club back then, and any club in the Championship was an upward step at that point in time. But it's just unfortunate for Laurent that it hasn't sort of panned out how he probably expected it to go. I mean, I thought Ince's comments in midweek were pretty interesting, in saying that he spoke to 3 or 4 players who've left in the summer, and the grass isn't always greener as such. So yeah, maybe Laurent is one of them. I mean, I can't think of anyone else. Renamotor and Swift are also left, obviously, for pastures new. Maybe Laurent was being referred to there by Ince, but like you said, it's written in the stars that he'll pop up to bag a winner for Stoke in the 90th minute, isn't it?
Yeah, it feels that way. But let's talk about the prediction league to end the show then. For QPR, Westy pulled out a 2-2 draw, which I think it was probably a little bit of a consolation prize after a not great performance, isn't it? So, 2-2 draw, which means that he goes to within 2 points of Ben Thomas, who's leading the prediction league this season. Ollie got a draw as well, so he's at a point up in the wooden spoon race, which is with me, actually. So, otherwise, we all said wins. Funny enough, so that's all a lot of not many points for that. So I am going to go for that 1-0 defeat to Stoke this weekend. I think that it's just going to be one of those games that catches us out, and is probably going to be a really low quality game of football, if I'm being honest. And Reading can come out on top of those games quite often, but yeah, away from home, we just haven't been able to squeeze it out, have we? So I think that's going to happen. What do you think for a score prediction for this week then?
Yeah, I'm going to have to go for a 1-0 win. I think we seem to bounce back pretty well on the whole from disappointing results so far this season. So yeah, I think we'll go for a 1-0 win. But I completely agree with you. I don't anticipate many goals or goal mouth action. That's usually the case when we go to Stoke. But for some reason, I'm confident that we'll come out with 3 points.
Beautiful. Well, yeah, I think that my feeling is that quite often you get in these games after about 15 minutes or so, you look at Twitter and you realise that there's actually been no updates because it's just not much has happened. I feel like this could be one of those games, certainly a prime candidate for an under 2.5 goals scored if you're that way inclined. So yeah, we'll be back after that game. We've got a midweek free, and then we'll have another midweek free actually before we go to Man United in the Cup. So next week we'll have lots to preview for that game going up to Old Trafford. But hopefully Reading can go into that with a bit of a bounce back and a bit of a win. Thanks for Harry for popping on this week then.
No worries, Mark. Anytime. I enjoyed it.
And we'll be back after the Stoke game. Hopefully, all of the things that I've just said about the Stoke game prove to be wrong. Hopefully, it's not a 1-0 defeat. Hopefully, it's not a drab, boring game. But this is the Championship. Crazy things happen. Thank you for listening. Come on, your arse.
You smile, funny